So they had to send a car to get my dad, and then he shows up, and then from there, like I'm just giving you brief really quick, and then they sent us another room because I guess by this time they found the jogger, but we didn't know, right? And so they said, well, we're not gonna let you go because some detectives want to talk to you. And so now we talking about the whole night. We'd have been in the precinct.
14 years old.
14 years old. And so they hungry, no drink, no food, no sleep, because we've been up the whole night. And then I remember them taking Kevin, and then he was the first person who they started to question. And he was in it for a long time. And we were sitting out there waiting for him. And I know that by the time I went in the room, it was already daylight, because my dad had to go to work.
Right.
And because they said it was a disappearance ticket, it's a misdemeanor, you just go to family court.
Which is a bullshit charge anyway, because I've never heard anybody getting a fucking charge for trespassing.
Yeah, it was a bunch of bullshit charges. And so
he didn't even couldn't know.
Nah. And he said, my dad said, well, look, they're gonna release him. So just told my grandma, stay with him. I'm gonna go to work and just take him home, and that's it. And she was like, it's fine. So I know around that time it was 6 a.m, but
hey, peace, world.
In the room.
Thanks for pressing play on another Pay Me No Mind Sports and Entertainment clip. My name is Wood. I just really wanted to check in really quickly. I'm hoping that if you subscribe, if you're a Netflix subscriber, that you take the time this weekend and check out this project When They See Us from Ava DuVernay.
What I saw, what I didn't saw.
Very powerful stuff, man. And I just wanted to come on and cook on it for a minute.
And now I'm in the precinct, and that goes on for hours.
I just hope that it's being supported.
It starts off
in the manner that it should be.
Then it starts to get a little bit more aggressive as time.
You might be busy today, but let me get into it, man. It's 4 parts.
This officer comes in. My grandmother
lost something I was checking out. But it's 4 parts. Each episode is about is a little over
each episode is so the officer comes and knocks on the door, and he tells my grandma
each episode is a little over an hour, I believe.
And when she steps out, that's when
it just details what happened back in the late 1980s with the trial of the Central Park 5.
The fuck are you looking at?
I just wanted to say I became familiar with it mainly checking out a podcast.
And then the knock.
Rest in peace to Reggie Osei, also known as Combat Jack. But that's where I first picked up on the story. They had a Combat Jack did it was hip hop. But he veered off into other topics as well, and one of those that he covered was the Central Park 5. Of these guys, really quickly, their names were all 14 to 16 year old black males in New York City. And the names were Antron McCray, Kevin Richardson, Yusef Salam, Raymond Santana Jr. and Corey Wise. And like I said, I stumbled across the Combat Jack show, and they had I believe it was Raymond Santana on there. Actually, you can Google that if you want to listen to it. If you dig the show and want to the series and want to hear directly from one of the guys in the movie, Raymond Santana Jr. If you Google the Central Park 5 and Combat Jack show, it's actually still up on SoundCloud. You can go and check that out. And
when that knock comes, they break away. Like
I vaguely recall listening to it. I believe it's been out. The episode, it's a 4-year. The show is 4 years old, and I want to say Combat Jack passed away maybe a year and a half ago, maybe even 2 years now. So
there was no woman. I never saw no woman.
It's out there. You can hear directly for Raymond Santana Jr. His part of the show, his story where they spent an extended amount of time on him was pretty serious, as was everybody. But
and he jumps in and he stops.
So I'm just gonna get my little. This is kind of all unscripted. Get out. But I'm gonna just chop it up real quick and then get on off of here.
Sitting there scared. But at that moment, I felt like this dude saved.
Getting into some of the stars, the actors in the series.
And it's working.
I mean, if you ever look at
let me see
technique, which is the 9 steps on how to break somebody down.
The lady that plays the attorney, I feel sorry for her, man, because her name is the actress is Felicity Huffman, and she's been on something else that has some kind of racial undertones to it. I can't remember what show it was, but I hated her then, and I hated her now for playing this Linda Fairstein. I don't know if she was a district attorney or what. No, she was the detective, I believe. She was the lead detective on this situation. And they basically they conducted the whole investigation pretty much from the jail, from the police station. And she was the one that set everything in motion, and she was the head of the sexual assault unit, I believe, at the time that this was going on. And they had they had gathered up all of these kids because they were in Central Park wilding, quote unquote wilding was what they called it. They would go through the park. Some of the kids and teenagers would go to the park and just wild out, basically harassing other people in the park.
Kevin did it.
Assaulting people, punching, getting in fights, yelling, making noise, etc., etc., etc. And so these kids went down there, and they said it was like 30 of them. And they went down there and were doing this and bothering different people in the park and whatnot. And at the same time, this jogger, her last name was Miley, but I believe she was an investment banker. But she goes jogging at night. She gets she's assaulted. She's sexually assaulted. She's beaten and basically left for dead. And when she's found, they round up these kids, and things kind of spiral out of control from there. But basically, Felicity Huffman's character, she was aware of all the stats that she mentions in the show, that there had been like 3,400 rape cases. And nobody, everybody was going free, or they were just going unsolved. And so in this particular instance, she was like, it's not going to happen again, that this lady is in here and at the hospital fighting for her life, and we're just going to let these kids go on these disturbing the peace charges. We're going to take this thing all the way. And those people, those aren't witnesses to this crime. They weren't just in the scene at the time of the crime. They were actually the perpetrators. And she convinces everybody in her department to collect these stories from these young men. None of them had their parents present during the questioning. Their statements were coerced and whatnot. And over 40-some hours of being kept awake, isolated, and under this duress of being questioned, they cracked. They succumbed to all of that, and then they made statements. They made statements on camera. They wrote statements. They signed documents. Bringing all the facts together, or the made up facts, the manufactured facts, and.
Because my parents not in the
it's crazy, and so the show starts. Well, go back to the actors.
I got one more thing. I said what?
Antron McCray. So there's a young actor and an older actor for when the guys got out of prison. So it's 2 actors each for them.
That was in there a lot. You going home?
Man, who's in here? I didn't want to go through everybody's name.
So now it goes from
Anjanou Ellis. You might be familiar with her, but she plays Yusef Salam's mom, Sharon Salam. Vera Farmiga. I'm really fond of her as an actress, but she plays the district attorney, Elizabeth Lederer, and she actually tried to stick up for these kids at time and questioning all of this shoddy evidence that they tried to put together. And but
And so,
the pressure and the city watching it, the story, the way that the story grew into something, she eventually went along with this and prosecuted these kids. And in part, if you're familiar with this whole thing, a younger Donald Trump actually took out an $85,000 ad in the New York Times or the new whatever it was in the Post or the Times, and he was adamant that he wanted this package, I believe was the phrase that was used, but he wanted these kids to face the death penalty. He was that dug in on this thing. And who else was on here? I already mentioned Felicity Huffman, Joshua Jackson. He plays one of the defense attorneys. Famke Janssen, you might be familiar with her. She was another detective, I believe. She was another detective. She might have been a homicide detective or something, but she played a role in it early on, questioning all of this evidence and saying that the case was shaky at best. One of the huge standouts here, just because of the character that he played and his story, which kind of he went out on his own path because he was the only kid that was above 16. But Jarrell Jerome played Corey Wise. Jarrell Jerome was also in Moonlight. They spend most of the fourth episode on his story, man, and I was sitting there in episode 3. I kind of even forgot about him and was in, about it before I'm 40 something minutes into the third episode, and I'm like, damn, where's the Corey Wise kid? And once you get into the fourth episode, you see why they kind of let that cook for a minute and handled it in the manner that they did. But phenomenal job by him. John Leguizamo is also in here. He plays Raymond Santana Jr.'s dad. Obviously, he's a senior. Who else was in here? Niecy Nash. She plays Corey Wise's mother.
And then after that, we did the videotape.
Marquise Rodriguez plays a young Raymond Santana. William Sadler from Power. He was a detective that was working in cahoots with Felicity Huffman's character. Blair Underwood is in this as one of the defense attorneys. And then Michael Kenneth Williams plays Bobby McCrae, the father of Antron McCrae. So that's some of the big names in here. The older Antron McCrae was played by Jovan Adipo. He was in Fences. He was Denzel's son in Fences. He played a pretty strong role, and he had a pretty good showing in this too. So looking into the story, like I said, man, it's a tough watch. I didn't sit here and lost half my Saturday fitting all 4 of the episodes in one sitting. And we've seen this before. People in impoverished communities catching cases. You can't afford to write attorneys.
And then that's the story came out where they said we were down there singing.
The pain. The painful thing here was that all of these law enforcement professionals sat here and chose to ignore, doing the right thing.
That don't even make sense.
And
that don't even make sense.
Once the ball was rolling, it was no way to, it was no way to turn it around. It was no way to stop it.
At what point?
And then once these kids. Just in watching TV and movies all these years and knowing about the Miranda Act and watching First 48 and knowing about a lawyer, asking for a lawyer, and just knowing that young kids, just so many basic laws and rules and protections were violated and disregarded. It's unbelievable that this happened, man. Each of the individuals served between 6 and 14 years.
My bail was 25
in prison,
put up to 10,
or in juvenile facilities.
Everybody's got bailed out.
Corey Wise being the one that was 16, he was automatically or immediately put into adult prison.
So in your game, man,
you can put two and two together very quickly and understand that life got tough for that young man very quickly. And on top of that, going in as a rape, as a sexual offender, there's certain there's certain prison justices that happen with those types of situations. Then it's also the fact that it was such a publicized case and everybody knew about it. So once these guys go into prison, you sit here as the viewer, you know what's the truth, but none of these other characters, none of the other inmates, none of the guards, nobody is trying to hear anything about innocence. And it's a tough watch, man. I mean, I sat here for the second, third, and fourth episode. I didn't even get nothing to drink. I didn't eat nothing. I'm just sitting here watching something that's just it's unimaginable, man. I mean, I can't believe. I just can't believe that this happened. I mean, I can't believe because I know how things play out in the justice system in this country. But once they get into the fourth episode and dig into Corey Wise's situation individually, and to watch what that young man went to, like I said, 16 years old, put into the system. Not knowing, and then his character coming off of the street, his character really seemed to be I don't want to say slow, but he was just kind of an immature young man, and he hadn't spent a lot of time in school. He wasn't able to read too well when they asked him to read something in court, and just none of these kids had an idea of what they were up against. Raymond Santana Jr. and Corey Wise in particular, just real tough stories. The one sad thing here was Kevin Richardson guy. He was the youngest out of the bunch, and when we meet him in the first episode, he's an aspiring trumpet player, and that's how things went. Just a young kid, man, just a younger brother. He spends a lot of time with his sister. He's doing what all young kids want to do. And big dreamer, and was just talking about getting on with being a musician. And he actually, the story starts with how all of the kids,
these motherfuckers will be fighting for my life. Right.
Are just at that situation, at that crossroads, and as a young person, when you could go do the wrong thing that you don't even know is the wrong thing, or you could do something, you could go home and study, you could go home and read a book, you could go home and hang out with your parents or your family or something, and two of these kids, I believe, chose to, had other things to do, like Corey Wise was sitting up having, getting a bite to eat with a girlfriend at the time. And I believe Yusef was heading down to Central Park and saw him in the restaurant and banged on the window and said, "Hey, come and hang out with us." And so from that moment right there, Corey Wise, his whole life changed. He could have sat there and enjoyed the company of his girlfriend, but he opted to go hang out and do this wilding thing and get into some trouble. And it looked like most of the guys weren't even a part of the violence of attacking cyclists and joggers and other people out enjoying the park. They just were kind of there. And another crazy thing is how this group of 30 kids supposedly gets whittled down into these 4 kids. But like I said, man, once they get into the case in the second episode, they get into maybe at the end of it, maybe in the second half of the second episode. Once they get into the case and you see how bad the timeline is that they constructed, you see how bad the physical evidence is, the DNA didn't match up with any of the kids. None of the statements were all jacked up. All 5 kids, every kid had a different story, and they didn't even know each other. Only a couple of them really knew each other going into this thing, and they're talking. They got them on camera saying one another's name after they've given them the name. So
and then the counselors grabbed me and they rushed me.
It's just extremely. Like I said, it's a tough watch, man. It's a heartbreaker, and
it was on.
I don't know, man. It's just we see this all too often, and it's disgusting.
Shirts and they were the light blue. And when you go down,
I guess before I get ready to get on off here, I did want to say that.
And we talking about 14, 15-year-old kids.
The young Kevin Richardson, that actor, I'm trying to find his name.
And motherfuckers is getting jumped. Motherfuckers are going in your room at night. Like you sleep,
where is
flip the whole bed on you. You know, and that's how it was.
The actor that plays young Kevin Richardson,
I knew a couple of dudes.
He was just so damn believable. I mean, and he was the youngest one.
That was it.
I believe. He was really the youngest one.
You know, like
I can't find his name.
Was that because it was so many of us that went in.
Oh, Asante Black. So yeah, he was just so damn believable.
25.
It was ridiculous. And then
people got jumped. Some people
Antron McCray, the young Antron McCray kid, was played by Khalil Harris. He was phenomenal too.
You know, the worst.
On the side, though, one thing that you're seeing in this is just the time that's devoted by Ava DuVernay, the time that's spent.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, once I dropped one kid,
the time is spent like humanizing these guys, showing you that this was some family's sons and brothers.
So I didn't really
and
after Sparfield,
you know, this was somebody's cousin. I mean, these kids were loved, like Leguizamo and you know, the Santana family. Like his dad,
they sent them
you know, was a proud father. Michael K. Williams had a real rough moment to watch
they sent them the right
because
in the first night they got jumped by 25 inmates.
He advised his son, not knowing the law. The only one's parent who was really vocal and really stood up and stood tall was Yusef Salam's mom. She was the only one that really used the law against the police department as they were trying to question her son. But stuff had already been, information had already been given by the time she got there. John Leguizamo's his character's mother was there at the police station at first, but she only spoke Spanish. And these detectives, man, they just railroaded these kids. I mean, they separated them. They kept them separated from their parents. They manipulated the parents. They pressured the parents when they wanted them to get their way, and they said, if you cooperate with us, we'll allow you to go home. And that's what the kids obviously wanted after 40-something hours of interrogation. They just wanted to go home, so they said what they had to say, and that's what led to the concrete evidence against them. And
like throughout the whole trial and everything. But like, are you reading the papers now?
I don't know, man. In this, she spends a great amount of time fleshing out all the family and the support and the family going through as these guys were all serving time. As they got released and came back to society, the struggles of trying to find a job. I thought that was another very dope thing that Ava DuVernay did. Was
out at the shit that's in the paper,
illustrating how tough life was,
Trump
being released back into society, and now having this sex offender record, and having being on parole and trying to find employment and things like that. So
dug so deep into
she could have handled it a number of ways, but she handled it very well with the dialogue and the different characters that spelled out these hard truths to to this difficult situation. And Santana's character,
stuff came about.
He comes back to his father, who's moved on in terms of new wife, new family. He has a new brother, a younger brother that's an infant. And he has to fit into this house that now has all these other people there. And then he wants to get out on his own and live on his own, but he can't get a job. And then once he does get a job, for some reason he gets their names are well known in the city, but he gets fired from his job, and so he turns to drugs and selling drugs, hustling. And that lands him back inside. And so you have that. But then I just want to spend a little bit of time on Corey Wise before I get on off of here.
If you see the night that we get convicted and let her walk out, she's the one clapping.
Yeah.
And so
that's just horrific, man. I mean, you got to sit here and imagine that.
And she just starts going in on us about our
how a human being can adapt to anything, man, and figure out a way to survive. And he spent
Have you been on her show?
I haven't been
an exorbitant amount of time in solitary confinement
to do line, and she was there. And she came out. Hey,
he was being beat up, probably violated, probably sexually assaulted. They didn't go into that.
Really?
But
when the guys got,
he's getting attacked by 4, 5, 6 guys at a time, man, and really can't defend himself.
And we all okay, any day now.
I don't know. I would have to read into it. I don't know if this was just the cinematic aspect of it. I don't know if Ava DuVernay made this part of it up. I never heard this detail right here. But Corey Wise ends up running into this Hispanic cat
it's kind of like a media,
inside. Once he develops a relationship with one police officer who had a heart, who was able to treat him like a human being still. And so he starts nursing Corey Wise kind of back to feeling like somebody in the world gave a damn about it. And so he starts coming out of his shell a little bit. The correction officer gives him a job of cleaning up the day room and kind of softly reinserting him back into the world inside. And he gets into a fight cleaning up the day room with this individual. And they throw some hands and whatnot. This was kind of the first time that Corey Wise was able to stick up for himself. And
we here to help you. And they're like, how you here to help me? Like, we here to help you.
He goes through a couple of different parole hearings.
I didn't do that.
And the one thing that they point out is that he wouldn't admit to this crime just to be released or for it to help enhance his likelihood of being released. And that's what the parole board wanted to hear him say was, I accept, I accept guilt and punishment, or I admit guilt for my role in the admission of this, this act that I've been charged in doing time for. He just refused to do that. So anyway, they show this individual that he gets into this altercation with, and then years later, at another prison that he gets transferred to, trying to move to a location that was closer to New York City so his mother could visit him. This individual, they re-encounter one another at another prison, and this individual tells him, asks him his name. And then he says, do you remember me? And, he's like, yeah, we got into that little fight at the thing. And the guy asks him a couple of questions and says, well, you've been holding on to the fact that you're innocent. You still telling the world that you're innocent, huh? And they go back and forth and whatever. And then the kid, the Hispanic cat, says something to him about maintaining faith and whatever.
The blood that cried by a guy named Harry.
So then Famke Jensen, who I mentioned earlier, the Hispanic cat actually contacts some people and wants to admit to, he wants to admit to something.
I feel like I've been kicked in my stomach.
He had already admitted to what landed him in prison, but he said he had something else to talk about. So Famke Jansen's character goes and meets with him, and he admits to the Central Park jogger situation. He details how he did it and how it all happened, and they even take DNA, and the DNA confirms that
how do I get a conviction?
He was with this Miley. I think her name was Tracy. Her first name might have been Tracy. So I don't know if that was legit or not. I don't know if that was just put in here for the to make the story better. But if that's what really happened, that would just be freaking phenomenal. That's how that played out. And from there, they have all the information that they need, and it all goes through where Corey Wise gets released, and then they go back and exonerate all 5 of the guys who've been living, with this hanging over their heads in the real world, and now everybody knows that they're innocent. And then they have this $41 million settlement with the New York City or the state of New York, whoever it was, but they ended up getting paid this $41 million for the whole situation. And at the end of the movie, in the credits, they actually reveal the real men. So yeah, man, it's just I hope people take some time and check this project out. We don't hear much about how what the streaming numbers are for
take that shit away.
You're lucky, man.
For Netflix's programs, all of that stuff is proprietary information and whatnot. But
come out.
It's just phenomenal, man. Like I said, the stuff that we do to one another down here on this planet, man, and in this world, sometimes is just unspeakable. And this just is on one hand, man, it's a hell of a story to sit here and watch, but then and it's so unfortunate, and it's pure evil and all the above. And then on the other hand, just to see the individuals that made it through this thing, man, and give you that reminder that we all need every once in a while, that no matter what you're going through or how bad things are for you, somebody in this world has it a million times worse. I'm sitting over here right now on the other side of town. It's a community that was hit by multiple tornadoes just a few days ago, and I'm over here in my normal life, and we donated some money, and some people from my job went through the city and visited the area, giving out water and donating water and whatnot to families and all. I didn't go because I had to travel for work that day and didn't have the opportunity. But it just gives you that reminder, man.
December of '95.
And then also, man, if you don't know anything about Ava DuVernay, she also did 13th. The documentary on the 13th Amendment, which digs into the judicial system, the correctional rehabilitation process in this country, and the fact that America is one of the most it's one of the I don't know what the phrase is, but we have the most individuals in custody in the world.
Kids was like this when they were older. A lot of people,
and that's been commercialized. That's been monetized through, and it's been politicized. It's how people have gotten into office. Check that out too. I mean, you might as well add that to the. If you watch all 4 of these episodes, if you haven't seen 13th, you might as well go on and sit there and watch that too, or either watch that before this. So I just really did this 30-something minute live stream, really, man, as my own personal salute to Ava DuVernay and everything that she's out here doing. And she has to feel phenomenal, man, that she's actually doing real projects that are fulfilling, that are
and then I had this
just authentic, man. I mean, I'm so impressed with her. It's ridiculous, man. But really quickly on her. She was just like in journalism,
I scanned the whole room.
And then she was also in PR. She had her own PR company for a while and was out there in the West Coast. I think she might even be from Compton. She's from the LA area, I guess. And from having these relationships with some networks behind the scenes and doing some different things in the world of PR, She parlayed that into getting into putting together scripts, and then did some short films, and then did a couple of movies. Went to the film festivals, and then it just took off from there. And she did Selma. That was critically acclaimed. Another one of my favorite movies. And then I didn't check out this A Wrinkle in Time project. It wasn't my thing.
Especially summertime.
And I want to say she was.
It don't get dark.
I want to say for a minute she was in the mix to do Black Panther. I thought before Ryan Coogler came on and did it. I want to say DuVernay was in the running to handle that, or for Wonder Woman or something. She was getting ready to do a major project, but A Wrinkle in Time was like actually one of the first movies where an African American director, I don't know if it's male or female, but had a budget that was over $150 million. I'll check that out one day, but it was a little too much fantasy for me personally. It was a little kid stuff, but she came right back, man. She, like I said, she's just talking it and walking it on a level that is admirable. And I know there's been some press out there. I know different. They've done some TV. Oprah Winfrey was also an executive producer to this thing. But I know there was different.
But
there was, they've probably been on the Breakfast Club, Sway in the Morning, and some of that stuff right there. But it should be everywhere, man. This is a really meaningful project. It's important, and I hope everybody watches it, man. I hope people see it. Maybe down the road there's some comments on here, and some feedback that other people enjoyed it, and
What'd you think of Big, man?
Maybe. So I wanted to come on here and do my part and talk about it. And that's pretty much it.
But that album is crazy.
Yeah.
Well, let me go on and get off of here, man. Like I always say,
that story, like when I watch that story, I can't.
You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start.
Even with Pop, we was raw.
To be great.
Somebody took.
We get on out of here.
And there was so much that they still had to give us.
Right.
And so when I see movies like that of
injustice,
injustice to our people,
injustices,
exactly, and we losing them. I can't watch the ending. I can't watch the ending of Malcolm X. Not even Selena. I can't watch that shit because
it's too close to home.
Yeah. These people are taken from us, and they had so much more to give.
Yeah.
And now we left with the work that they left.
You know what's crazy, man? How the same time that incident happened, Central Park rape happened, there was a woman in Brooklyn that got raped in Bed-Stuy, a black woman, right? And she got thrown off a roof. And they didn't make nothing about that.
Yeah, there was also an incident in New Jersey where they had these 5 kids that they sexually assaulted. I think she was mentally retarded in the basement, and even that didn't get nowhere near the press that we got.
Right.
And I remember
because the victim fit the profile of being somebody that America could get behind.
Yeah, and they did. I mean, they got behind. Frank Sinatra sent this woman flowers, and she got all these letters, and she became friends with the prosecutors and a lot of the police officers.
What were your thoughts about her?
Because they said that she lost the memory, so there was nothing really against her. Antoine used to always, he's always say, "I wish she can remember Ray. I wish one day